We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice-cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, you know. My cold is...
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day or ITV Hub or all four, but you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package, which is instantly downloadable to your device, and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Thursday. It is the 23rd of May. Hope you're all well and hope you all enjoyed last night's game. You witnessed, if you did watch this game, one of the best performances by a team in a European final that you're ever likely to see. Atalanta 3, Bayer Leverkusen 0. An absolute masterclass by Atalanta. Just one of the most perfectly planned out, perfectly executed performances you're ever going to see. The man-to-man high press, the aggression, the suffocation of Leverkusen in their defensive third and in the midfield was just absolutely incredible. And I saw a lot of people after the game say, oh, well, you know, Leverkusen just ran out of steam. They ran out of steam. And that's fair. Like, it is fair. Bayer Leverkusen have played a lot of football this year. 34 games in their domestic league campaign, obviously getting to the German Cup final as well as getting to this final. That's 52 matches that they've played. But Atalanta have played more. Atalanta have played more games this year because they play in a league that has 38 games. They also got to the final of their domestic cup and to this final. Last night was game 54 for them. And they still have 2 games left. And we're in a weird situation, just to step away from last night. We're in a weird situation now in the Italian league where Atalanta have now qualified for the Champions League as Europa League winners. That is their right. But Serie A was granted an extra Champions League spot for next season. And according to Dale Johnson, if Atalanta finish 3rd or 4th, then they will qualify for the European Cup as domestic qualification. But if they finish 5th, they'd actually count as Europa League winners, and therefore Roma would get that extra spot. So here's the thread. So Atalanta win the Europa League. That presents a host of questions. How many places in the Champions League for Serie A? What happens to the place in the Champions League for the Europa League winner? And what happens to the seeding for next season's Champions League? So how many places will Serie A get? We know Italy will have 5 teams in the Champions League next season, as they have one of the 2 extra places for league performance. Atalanta are 5th. If they finish 5th and 5th only, Italy will have 6 teams in the Champions League. Roma will get a Champions League spot if Atalanta finish 5th. But if Atalanta finish 3rd or 4th, Roma end up in the Europa League because Juventus or Bologna would drop into that 5th spot, and therefore they would get it. So if your Europa League winner finishes in the normal qualifying spots, being top 4 in Italy, top 4 in England, top 4 in Spain, top 4 in Germany, top 3 in France, then the Europa League winner's spot doesn't exist. You don't get that extra spot. But if they finish 5th in either Italy this year or Germany this year, because those spots are not fixed, they will move from year to different leagues, then the Europa League qualification for the Champions League trumps that. And so the team finishing 6th in either of those leagues would get that spot. So Atalanta have 2 games left to play in the league. They play Torino at home this weekend, which is the final weekend of the Serie A campaign. But their game against Fiorentina had to be rescheduled and doesn't take place now until the 2nd of June. So Atalanta don't need to do anything in those games. They're in, regardless. They're in. They're in both via the league and now the Europa League. So they can afford to lose both games and just finish in 5th place. And that will then give Roma a Champions League spot despite finishing 6th. It also it also affects the title holder rebalancing. So Benfica need Atalanta to finish 3rd or 4th to go directly into the group stage. If Atalanta finish 5th, they take up the spot of the Europa League title holder, and they get an automatic spot into the group stage. And Benfica, who finished second in Portugal, would have to qualify to get into the group stage of the Champions League. And then Barcelona. So at the moment, Barcelona sit in pot 1 for the group stage draw for next year's Champions League. However, if Atalanta finish 3rd or 4th, that stays as it is. But if they stay 5th, Roma have a higher coefficient than Barca, and it would shove Barca into pot 2. Leverkusen, despite winning the Bundesliga, will be in pot 2 regardless, because pots are ordered by club coefficient. If Fiorentina win the Europa Conference League next season and finish outside the top 7, Serie A will have 9 teams in Europe, potentially 6 in the Champions League, 1 in the Europa League, and then potentially Fiorentina in the Europa League as winners of the Conference League, and then 1 other in the Conference League. That's pretty impressive for Serie A. Now, it seems unlikely that Fiorentina will qualify domestically through the league, but they can just get in by winning next week. They get into Europe by winning next week, and that would then push a European spot to Torino or Napoli, who are battling out for 9th place. It's quite confusing, but it is pretty cool. If Dortmund win the Champions League, having finished 5th in the Bundesliga, Eintracht Frankfurt would actually get into the Champions League next season as well, because Dortmund would take the Champions League holder spot, because it's not a top 4 position, so they get a spot, and Frankfurt would get that extra spot that the Bundesliga has been given. And it would push somebody else who would normally automatically qualify into the qualifiers. Or it could be Eintracht, depending on their coefficient. So yeah, lots to still figure out with those leagues. Anyway, back to last night. We witnessed Atalanta from minute 1 go on the offensive and press and harry and disrupt Leverkusen, while also playing incisive football. And this is where Gasperini has just absolutely put on a masterclass. The football that they played was sensational. The movement, the interchanging. That first goal, Zabacosta, Koopmeiners, who's the left side centre midfielder, is over on the right side, plays the ball into the channel, from right wing into the channel. Zabacosta makes the underlapping run, picks the ball up, drives into the box. It's just a cutback into a dangerous area. He's not aiming for a specific person. He's just putting the ball into a dangerous area. And Lookman realizes that Palacios is not paying attention and undercuts him, gets to the ball first and finishes really well. The second goal highlighted one of the flaws in Xabi Alonso's plan yesterday. Alonso got everything wrong yesterday. Team selection was wrong. His game plan was wrong. The ball played out from the Leverkusen defence. Amin Adli, who's not a striker, can't play back to goal. Plays a loose header back towards his own goal, back into a central area. The ball travels quite a bit. Lookman picks it up probably 30 yards from goal. Feints to go one way, puts it through Granit Xhaka's legs, and then doesn't overthink it. He just passes it with whipping power into the corner of the net. It is a phenomenally good goal by a player that Everton, Leipzig, Fulham, and Leicester all discarded. A player that looked like he was going to be a journeyman, but has now found a real home at Atalanta and is absolutely thriving. He was sensational last night. I love the fact that when you look at that Atalanta team, like Kolasinac, I'm not a big fan, but Gasperini took him in, changed his position from a traditional left back to a left side centre back, which always seemed like it was more suited to what his game was. And he's done well for them. Xabi Costa was written off after a failed spell at Chelsea. De Ketelaere brought into Milan for big money, not used properly, and binned off immediately. Atalanta take him in. Lookman, like I say, multiple clubs gave up on him. And Scamacca, who was at West Ham, and David Moyes in his infinite wisdom decided that, no, Mikel Antonio is more what we're looking for here. And binned him off after a year. And Gasperini took the three of them in and has created a front three that is very, very hard to play against. Very, very hard to play against. And you look at that Leverkusen team yesterday. So Kovar starts in goal. He's not the first choice. I'm not sure what the logic was there. Tapsopata Hincapié, that's the normal back three. But then he's played Stanisic right wing back and Frimpong right side of the front three. When what's worked for them all season has been Frimpong right wing back and Hoffman in that kind of right side of the front three role. Frimpong looked completely uncomfortable in that position. And he was very easy for Atalanta to bottle up. Palacios, Xhaka, Grimaldo, that's all fine. Wirtz, that's fine. But then Amin Adli up front. You've got Boniface and Schick fit and ready to play. Why are you not playing one of your strikers? Having that target man has been vital to Leverkusen all season long. And I get that Stanisic was probably a reward for some of the recent performances, especially late goal that he got to maintain the unbeaten run, but still. Not starting Hoffman, playing Frimpong out of position, playing Adli out of position instead of one of the nines. Alonso got it all wrong. And Atalanta punished them. And the third goal, Leverkusen are just throwing the kitchen sink at them. They're not troubling them, but they're trying to play their football and trying to be aggressive with the ball and play high up and open up a very stubborn defence. But Atalanta just killed them on the counter. And Scamacca carries the ball, finds Lookman. He squares up Tapsoba 1v1. Tapsoba's already been booked for a foul on Lookman, so he can't commit to get too close. Lookman knocks it by him and just rifles a left-footed shot. Gives the goalkeeper no chance. It's 3-0. It's a hat-trick for Lookman. It's game over. And you would have to be absolutely thrilled for Atalanta. You would have to be thrilled for Ladia, for Gasperini. 8 years of work, 8 years of graft at that club to turn them into a regular in Serie A, which hadn't always been the way with them, to turn them into a contender for European spots, which was rarely the way with them. Like, I look back at my time watching football from, the early 90s. They had a 6-year run in Serie A from, let's go back a bit earlier, right? Let's go back to the early 80s. They're in Serie C in 81, 82. They get promoted to Serie B. 2 years there, promoted to Serie A, relegated. A year in Serie B, promoted back up. 6 years in Serie A, relegated. Promoted at the first attempt. 3 years in Serie A, relegated. 2 years in Serie B, promoted. 3 years in Serie A, relegated. Up, then down again, then up again. Then they get 4 years in Serie A before they're relegated. That brings us to 2010, and they're back starting a season in Serie A. They get promoted at the first attempt. So they've been a yo-yo club with a couple of good runs. They've been Crystal Palace, is what they've been. 30 years of basically being Crystal Palace. They finished 12th, 15th, 11th, 17th, and 13th. And then we get the Gasparini era. 4th, 7th, 3rd, 3rd, 8th last year, very disappointing, and 5th.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
An enormous turnaround from where they had been and what they'd been. Where the only success they'd ever really had was winning Serie B to get promoted back into Serie A just to get relegated again. In the entire history of the club, they'd won one major trophy, the Coppa Italia final in 1963. Since then, they'd been in 5 finals, including the one this season, and lost all of them. They'd been in the Cup Winners' Cup. They'd had a couple of goals in Europe, right? So they win the Coppa Italia in 62-63. In the Cup Winners' Cup the following year, they get knocked out in the first round. They lose the Coppa Italia final in 86-87, while, by the way, also getting relegated. And they drop into Serie B. But that season, they actually get to the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup as a Serie B team. They qualify for the UEFA Cup, the Europa League now, for the 89-90 season out in the first round. Qualify for the following season. They get to the quarterfinals. They don't see any European football again until he arrives. Now, the first couple of goals, not great. Europa League round of 32, out. Europa League playoff, out. Champions League quarterfinals. Champions League round of 16. Champions League group stage, drop into the Europa League, out in the quarterfinals. But now they have a major European trophy to call their own. And it's fully deserved. If we look at some of the players they've had and how much fun they've been to watch, like when they had Ilicic and Papu Gomez and Luis Muriel and Duvan Zapata as that front four, with Hattebauer raiding down one wing and Robin Gosens raiding down the other. They were just so much fun to watch. Martin Deroon still kicking about now. He was in midfield for them. Like, they were just so much fun. Jim City and Toloi, they've been there for much of this run. Absolute legends of the club. But to look at that team now, I mean, he didn't start last night. He came off the bench. Scalvini came on, was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thought Hine had a really good game as well. Jim City was solid. Kolasinac was solid while he was on. He had to go off at half-time. Ruggeri's an academy kid. Really good last night. Zabacosta, like I mentioned earlier, picked him up off the scrap heap. The front three, kind of all off the scrap heap. Coop Miners, really good performance last night with Ederson next to him. He's a player that I'm not a huge fan of. I think he can pass you out of games quite often. I think he's inconsistent. Ederson, who was looking like he might just be a journeyman, he'd been all just bounced around year after year. Atalanta picked him up 2 years ago, and now he's absolutely incredible. His performance last night was just amazing. Juan Musso in goal. He's not the first choice goalkeeper. He's the backup, but he's the European goalkeeper. He's a top keeper in his own right. They paid big money to bring him in. And he lost his place in the league because he'd been a little bit inconsistent. Brought in from Udinese. I think they paid like 18 million for him. He'd been inconsistent. He lost his place to Karnaseki, but they kept him for the European competition, and he was great last night. There's just a squad full of players there that all of them owe huge amounts to this manager, because he's either kept faith with them when they've had rough times, or he's picked them up when other clubs have given up on them. Like De Roon, let's take De Roon as an example. He was at Heerenveen, brought to Atalanta, had a good year. Middlesbrough bought him, had a dreadful year. Atalanta were like, oh, well, we'll just take him back. Gladly, he's now been there 7 years. He's the club captain, 33 years of age. And last night, undeniably the highlight of his career. He didn't get to play because of injury, but he played a huge role in getting them there. 11 games in the run to the final. He absolutely warrants his winner's medal. It's not like, not like he missed a chunk of the season, 46 games in all competitions. There's just this tremendous feeling around the club. And you know what? It translates off the field as well. Like, look at the stadium and what they're doing with it and the way they're rebuilding it. Go and look at what that stadium looked like 10 years ago. And it was a crumbling mess. But now it's being developed into one of the better stadiums, I think, in Italian football. Again, it's going to be small. It's going to be 22,000, 23,000. They might extend it a bit more. But, it's a perfect football stadium. You don't need to have enormous monoliths. Sometimes you need to look more at intimate and atmosphere. And that's what they've done with how they're rebuilding the stadium. But I'm so impressed by what I saw last night. You know what's funny is they were bang average this season until they played Liverpool. And they've been world beaters since. And Crystal Palace were bang average this season until they played Liverpool. And they've been world beaters ever since. And De Ketelaere will join on a permanent deal this summer. You'd imagine they'll keep Emile Holm as well. There's a lot of young players in that squad, a lot of promise. Karnaseki is, I think, going to be a great goalkeeper. I'm a huge fan of Scalvini. I think Ruggeri's excellent. I do very much like what I've seen from Isaac Hein, the centre-back. He's in 25. Another one to develop there. Continue to get better. Emile Holm, just he looks such a good player. He's 24. They've got a couple of players out on loan that are very, very important to them as well for the future, not for now, but for the future. And they just continue to find great value in all markets. Like Caleb Okoli, he's a centre-back with a big, big future, 23 years of age. Whether or not he stays long-term, I don't know. They've developed players like Bastoni, who's gone on, obviously, to have much more success elsewhere. But it was their academy he came through. Like Kulusevski was one of theirs. They just find value constantly. And if there's a big club who's going to do something silly, they'll jump in, grab the player, get a year out of them, and then sell them at a profit. Look at Christian Romero, who Juve never gave a chance to. They got him, had him for a year. He was the best centre-back in Serie A that year, and they sold him on. And they reinvest that money, and they reinvest really well. They've got outstanding scouting at that club. And they do keep players sometimes a little past the point of being useful, but by and large, they move people on at the right time. And you look at the amount of players that have played a significant role this year. So people have played over, let's say 24 games, because that's what Musso's at. Actually, that might be 25 after last night, but let's say Musso, Karnaseki, so two of the goalkeepers. In defence, Toloi, Holm, Hein, Jim City, Bakker, Backers only played 20. Ruggieri, Kolasinac, Hatibor, Scalvini, Koopmeiners, Pasalic, Ederson, Darun, De Ketelaere, Miranchuk, Adamola Lookman, and Scamacca. And El Bilal Toure, just below the 20 mark, but again played a big role in the back half of the season. Once Luis Muriel left, he got more opportunities and he started to show what he's capable of. I think he's going to be a big player for them next year as well. It's just a squad full of players that are contributing. You know, there's nobody that's gotten 30 goals from this year. Scamacca has 18. Only 11 in the league. Koopmeiner's got 15, 12 in the league. Lookman got 15, 9 in the league. De Ketelaere 14, 10 in the league. But Pasalic 7, Ederson 7, Muriel 6, he's gone now. Miranchuk 4, Bilal Toure 3, Ruggieri 2, Zabacosta 2, Holm, Jim City, Backer, Zortea, Kolasinac, Scalvini, Bonfanti, and Zapata all scored for them this year. And they're, by all accounts, pretty high on that Bonfanti kid. Another young centre-back. They've just done such an incredible job over recent years. Like Jeremy Boga picked him up when Sassuolo were ready to get rid of him, brought him in, developed him, sold him. Develop is probably a stretch. He'd already developed quite well, but they made a decision to bring him in and then sell him on at a profit. Rasmus Højlund, another one. Huge profit from them. I think they bought him for 15 million. But this past summer, they spent 500,000 on Vlahovic, who was brought in to join the academy squad. 10 million on Mitchell Bakker. I think they'd like a redo on that one, to be honest. 28 million, these are euro figures, by the way, on El Bilal Toure. 25 million on Scamacca. 3 million loan for De Ketelaere with a 23 million option to buy, and a 2.5 million loan for Holm with an 8.5 million option to buy. And that's quite a bit of money. But then you look at the sales. Malinovsky, 10 million. They got all of his best years. Sold him to Marseille. Didn't work out. He's now back playing for Genoa in Syria. Sam Lammers, player they picked up a couple of years ago, didn't work out, but they've now sold him on to Rangers. Hasn't worked there. He's gone to Utrecht, I think. Matteo Pessina, solid player, spent 6 years there, but had a bunch of loans, and when they got a good offer for him, they moved him on, and they made a profit on him. Boga made a good profit on him. Højlund, huge profit on him. They sold Joachim Mal in the summer as well. Made a profit on him. Mary Demirel, another one they sold, having gotten a really good season out of last year. Now, they made a profit on him. I think they would have made more had they kept him a bit longer. But, you know, they bought him and flipped him. So that was the plan. Emmanuel Latelat, who's at Middlesbrough, he's been with Atalanta since the academy days. They found him good and early. Developed him during summers and with targeted loans. And he's gotten better and better, and they sold him for a good fee because they didn't think he was ever going to be good enough to make the grade with them, but they made sure that they got a good fee. And you look at, they've got a bunch of players out on loan, developing. They'll bring them back in the summer to work under Gasparini and his team so that they can assess him. And then they'll make a decision from there. And, you know, they do clever things, like they'll loan a player with an obligation to buy, but they'll also put in a buyback clause. And the buyback clause, while the option to buy will be a lower figure than he's probably worth, the buyback clause will also be a lower figure than he's actually worth. It'll be very, let's say it's a 15 to 20 million pound player. They might sell him for like 8, but put a buyback in for 11. So they know if he does really well, yes, we're going to sell him for below average value. But if he continues to do well and we think he's ready for us, we'll buy him back at below average value. It's really, really clever, really well-run club. And just over the last few years, they've just made some really, really clever deals. Really, really clever deals. I'm a big fan of how they operate. Big fan of how they go about their business. And they're not afraid to, chuck players in here, there, into a deal to bring the cost down. Even if they think, okay, that player might end up coming back to bite us a little bit, they'll still make the deal. Amad Diallo is another one of theirs. Barely played for them. 3-5 games, something like that. 37 million. Did Kulusevski ever play for them? And yet they made a huge fee on him. So he had the loan. They brought him into their academy at 16, loaned him to Parma, and then Juventus paid a fortune to buy him. And obviously he ended up at Spurs. Christian Romero came to Genoa, had a great year. Juve bought him, loaned him back to Genoa, had another great year. Didn't seem like they wanted to keep him. Atalanta went in and loaned him with an option to buy for less than Juve had paid for Genoa. He was the best centre-back in the league. And they sold him. They just paid the option to buy and then sold him 2 days later. Juve paid 26 million euro for him. He had 2 great seasons on loan. And Atalanta, because of how smart they'd worked the option, they paid 16 million for him. And I'm pretty certain Spurs paid 50. So for a player they had 1 year on loan, they actually made 34 million in profit. That's how you run a football club. And I'm so, so happy that they got their just desserts yesterday. Absolutely tremendous. And with a bit of luck, we've got an FA Cup final to come at the weekend, which should be fun. We've got a playoff final at the weekend. We've got the Women's Champions League final coming. And then next week we get the Europa Conference League final and the Champions League final. And hopefully those games are as good as last night. Because even though it was a 3-0 beating, and it was a beating, it's not like Leverkusen played poorly. Atalanta just stole their lunch money and beat them up. Were brilliant. But Leverkusen didn't do anything. The players didn't do anything wrong. They just got outplayed, outmuscled, outfought. Alonso got outcoached. Simple as that. I'll go to break, come back. We'll do some questions. See you after this. Right, welcome back. So, questions time. This one is from Alex, and this one is: pick which player you think is more likely to reach the potential. We have 10 on this list here. So 10 sets of 2, basically. Jadon Sancho or João Felix? I feel like it's Jadon Sancho. João hasn't been... He had that one incredible year at Benfica and hasn't been the same since. He's had time at 2 different clubs who play drastically different styles, and it just hasn't worked. I feel like the best thing that João Felix could do is move to Serie A. I feel like that's the league that would really suit his skill set the best. But which of those clubs could actually afford to buy him? Which of those clubs has need for him? I mean, Milan would be ideal. If he could get to Milan, I think he'd be sensational playing off a striker with Leao to his left and a right winger. But I don't see it. I think Sancho has a better chance because I think Sancho's more versatile as well. He can play all across that line behind a striker. He can play off a striker. can play wide in a 4-3-3, plays a 10. I think he's just got more to his game. I think he would fit really well in Serie A, in La Liga. I think he could do really well in the Premier League as a 10, not as a winger, but as a 10. I've said before, if I was United, I'd be considering selling Bruno just because of his age. I think he's great, but just because of his age and you're miles away from winning anything, and rebuilding with Sancho as the 10, Rashford to his left and Amad Diallo to his right, and then having Garnacho as depth on either flank. But yeah, I think it's Sancho. Gio Reyna or Yunus Musa? Musa for sure. Better attitude. He's more versatile. He offers quite a bit more defensively, which I think is where he can really make his money. Like, I think that the ideal use of Yunus Musa is next to a 6 in a role similar to what Gini Wijnaldum used to perform at Liverpool, where you use the physicality and the athleticism and maximize those aspects of his game. I think he could be a transition killer defensively like Gini was. I think that would be a great use of him. Gio Reyna is definitely the more talented of the two, but he's injury prone, which is a concern. And also a big concern for me is I don't like how much noise there is from the outside around him, mostly because of his folks. I don't like that. I think that bodes badly. Eddie Nketiah or Reece Nelson? I think Eddie. I think he's got natural instincts in the penalty area, which are hard to learn. I think he's got a good finishing touch. I don't think either of them are destined to play for top clubs, but I think Eddie Nketiah will be the better and more successful player. Ilan Meslier or James Trafford? Oh, they both had nightmare Premier League seasons. Meslier last year, and the year before, to be fair, and Trafford this year, where they conceded a lot of goals and were dropped. Mellier's had a really good year this past season for Leeds, though, in the Championship. He's a lot further along in his development. Like, what age is Meslier? He's 23 now, isn't he? Ilan Meslier is 24. James Trafford, I think, is 21. So Meslier turned 24 earlier this year. Trafford is 22 later this year. Trafford has played 115 games. 113 senior games. Meslier has played 222. Meslier had 3 Premier League seasons, as well as a season and a half in the Championship, a season in the second division in France, and then a season in kind of non-league in France with Lorient reserves. I think he's a lot further along in his development. But I do like Trafford. I do think there's something there with James Trafford. He was really, really impressive at Bolton last year. So I'm going to say Trafford. Ansu Fati or Gabri Veiga. Ansu's the more talented player. Ansu is injury prone. Gabri Veiga, I think there's question marks over the attitude and the application. The fact that he ran off to take the Saudi money at such a young age, that would concern me. But I think the injuries to Ansu worry me a bit more. So I'll say Gabri Veiga. Moises Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez? I think they can both be incredible, but not together. That's my feeling of it. I think Enzo's probably got the higher ceiling as a footballer, but I think he's got the lower floor as well. I'm going to say Moises. Maxence Kakare or Ryan Cherky. Neither of these are where they should be at this point, given how long they've both been playing first team football. Now, Cherky is still only 20, but he's been in the Lyon team since the 1920 season. He's never scored more than 3 goals in a season. That worries me. And I worry that he ends up burnt out quite early because of how many games he's played. Like, you're already talking about 140 first team games at Lyon. That's an awful lot. Kakare, though, he's played a ton as well. Where is he? There he is. 170 games. He's in the team since the year before. But he's 24. He was later coming along. The fact that he's 24 and still playing for Lyon, I think his trajectory has flattened massively. He hasn't become the player he was expected to be. Same thing happened to Hossim Aouar before him. I mean, he looked incredible when he first broke through and then stagnated. I think Kakare has stagnated, and I'd worry about Cherky, but I give Cherky the advantage because he's 4 years younger. Moise Keane or Brian Brobby? Moise Keane, the last couple of years just haven't been great. Haven't been great at all. Did pretty well on his loan at PSG, but that's the French league. Disastrous time at Everton, and it hasn't been great since going back to Juve. Like, he's already very experienced. 223 career games, but only 47 goals. I'll go Brobby because he's younger. And I think if he gets a move this year to a mid-level team, we could see a good uptick from him. He's had a really good year this year, pretty good year last year. But if he gets a move this summer, now is the time for him to move. He needs to be out of Ajax come the start of next season. I'll go with him. Brendan Aronson or Tyler Adams. So I really like both of these players. But Tyler Adams, the 2 thigh injuries concern me, just given how he plays. That does concern me. Aronson I'm more fond of in terms of in terms of the aesthetic of watching him. I think he's really fun to watch. I assume he goes back to Leeds if they come up in the playoff. So I'll be curious to see if he comes back a more rounded player. Looked obviously really good with Salzburg, had flashes of brilliance with Leeds. This season with Union, it's been not great. They've not been great. Is a bigger factor. The team around him wasn't good. Luckily for them, goal difference kept them out of the relegation playoffs. They will get another shot at the Bundesliga next year. There's no option to buy as far as I'm aware. So I think he'll go back to Leeds. And I think Daniel Farke will use him quite well. We saw what he did with Emi Buendia and Todd Cantwell, and he got a lot of good out of both of them. So I'm going to say Aronson. He's 2 years younger, a year and a half maybe younger. But he hasn't had the injury issues. And the injury issues do very much concern me with Adams. I'd love to see Adams reach his potential. I really would. I think there's so much there in terms of his ability to just command the midfield and dominate with his ball winning, but the injuries really do worry me. And finally, Levi Colwill versus Wesley Fofana. And this one to me is actually an easy one. Fofana is the more talented, more unique centre-back, but Fofana's injury history I just don't see him becoming what he could have been. Like, when him and Saliba were at St Etienne together, there's no doubt he was the better one. He was the bigger prospect. But he's been absolutely racked by injuries. Like, William Saliba, Wesley. So they were together. They're both so young as well. I mean, Saliba is just turned 23. Fofana was 23 in December. You'd be looking back, go back to that kind of 18-19 year at St. Etienne. They both played in the B team together for a while. Everybody was looking at Fofana. Now, loads were looking at Saliba as well. They were both huge prospects for sure. But since leaving, Saliba has played 83 games for Arsenal. Played 17, 19, 20, the year they actually played together for St. Etienne. It's probably only 8, 9 games where they were side by side, but I mean, they were really good together. 17 games, that's 100. 52 for Marseille and 22 on a half-season loan at Nice. So you're looking at 174 games since really, actually plus 19 that season with St. Etienne. But just say from the 1920 season, okay, just from the start of 1920, you're looking at 174 games. Whereas with Wesley Fofana, from the start of that year, 28, 52, and 20. It's 100 games. Like 74 games more Saliba has played across the last 5 seasons. That's an awful lot of football. And you look at Fofana, played 28 games in 2021 for Leicester. Now, Saliba only played 22 games that year because he spent the half year on loan with Nice after Arteta left him rotting in the reserves for 6 months. The following year, Saliba goes to Marseille on loan. He plays 52 games. Fofana only plays 12 games because he breaks his ankle. Last season, Saliba played 33. Fofana played 22. This season, Saliba's played 50. Fofana didn't play at all because he tore his ACL. Such a shame. He's so talented. He's so talented, but the injury record just worries me. Really, really does worry me. Like, the only season he's played over 25 games is the first year at Leicester. That's a big concern. A big concern. So I'll say Colwill on the basis of I don't think Fofana will reach his potential because of the injuries. Colwill's really good, though. Really, really good. And he's the better of the two on the ball, for sure. So there we go. That is those. We've got a couple coming from the Discord as well. Isaac Gilding, question for the pod. Alternative awards of the season. Volleyed goal of the year. So I'm going to go Kudus, the bicycle kick against City. Though the Garnacho one also obviously immense. Headed goal of the season. Oof. Virgil in the League Cup final. Give me that one. Won a cup, so I'm taking that one. Pass of the season. I'll come back to that. Left-footed goal of the season, I'm going to go with Jeffrey Schlupp against Fulham. Because I'm not sure that ball isn't still moving. Recovery tackle of the season. Oh, wow. Let me come back to that. Reading the play moment of the season, come back to that one. Core strength. I think it's just Mo Salah, core strength moment season. Mo Salah with defenders hanging on him, dragging him, just being able to keep the ball and hold on to the ball. I'm just going to go Mo in general. Comeback story of the season for an individual player. So we're looking at someone that basically missed a lot of time with injury or maybe had dropped off to a significant amount and then came back, put in a really good year. I mean, if you were looking at someone that had a bad season last year and then had a great season this year, I'd go Van Dijk. But in terms of like was injured, maybe, wasn't expected to get back to a high level. Let me think. Could you go? No. Diego Carlos was really good for Villa for spells, but then he's coming back off the torn Achilles, but he also had spells where he was really poor, so I don't think you'd go with him. Moving down the league, United, Newcastle, West Ham, no. Palace, no. Brighton, no. Bournemouth, no. Fulham, anyone at Fulham? I mean, I thought Jimenez had a good season. Does he count? Because he did miss a lot of time with the head injury. Now, I know he'd been back, but I thought Jimenez kind of had a bit of a bounce back year. Inconsistent, though. Wolves, no. I'll tell you, though, the actual comeback story of the year, if we look outside the Premier League, I think I saw this the other day. What was this fella's name? Oh, this is going to bother me. Damn it, I'm not going to be able to find this. Hang on, let's see. This player got injured. He went headfirst into like an advertising hoarding and came back. Oh, I know who he is. His name is Alex Fletcher, and he played for Bath City. He had been involved in a collision with an advertising hoarding 10 months beforehand, and that left him in a coma. And he came back at the start of this season, return to action. So I'm going to go him for comeback story player of the season. Club team of the season, excluding all the league winners. I think Stuttgart is an amazing story, what they did this year, but Ipswich Town. It has to be Ipswich Town. Back-to-back promotions is just very, very difficult, so I'm going to go them. Biggest bastard of the season, Howard Webb, and the PGMOL as a whole, but him as the head of it. We'll go him. Burst onto the scene, manager of the season. I mean, he managed last season, but I think Sebastian Hoeneß, I think what he's done at Stuttgart this year, I think it has to be him. I mean, he's been around a little while. He was at Hoffenheim for 2 years, but what he's done at Stuttgart, I think it has to be him. I think he's elevated himself into that group of the best young managers around. You often see people mention Arteta, checkbook manager. What Sebastian Hoeneß did with a limited budget at Stuttgart is incredible. I think him, Kieran McKenna, I think those would be the two, but I'll go with him. So what have I got? I've got pass of the season, recovery tackle, and reading the game. Reading the game is tough. The moment in the Arsenal Porto game, the away one, that stuck out to me, where Alan Varela appears from nowhere to intercept a ball in midfield when it was being spread wide into an area where Arsenal had a 2v1 and Varela just appears out of nowhere and takes it away. So I'll go with that one. Recovery tackle. God. This past season. There's a couple of Arsenal ones that kind of come to mind. The one that jumps out to me is Declan Rice against Man City at the Emirates this season, where Matheus Nunes goes past him and tries to cut across in front of him again, and Rice makes a brilliant tackle, wins the ball cleanly. So I'll go with that. Best pass of the season now is tough because there's been a lot of incredible passes this year. There's a couple of Trent passes this year that have absolutely blown my mind. Unfortunately, most of them went to Darwin. I think he was unable to score. But I'll go... What game was that? Oh, wow. Is it Trent to Salah at Anfield? Is it against Arsenal? Yeah, it's Trent to Salah in the Liverpool-Arsenal game at Anfield, the one that just drops over Zinchenko's head. Salah picks it up, cuts back in his left foot and wraps it into the top corner. That's the pass of the season for me. And then, finally, AMK 2889. How highly do you rate Sebastiano Nella, and should he have received more than 5 caps for Italy? I mean, so often we look at players and they don't receive the amount of caps maybe their talent deserves. But Nella was playing for Roma in the 80s as a left back. Could play across the defensive line, but was primarily a left back. And I think when you look at the strength of the Italian national team in the 80s, it's very hard. I mean, Maldini comes along in the late 80s. Once he's in, that's it, game over. You're not getting beyond him. Prior to that as well, like, you've got Antonio Cabrini, who was incredible. You've got Gentile could play left back. Cabrini was brilliant. He probably is most responsible for Nella not getting more caps. Should he have won more than 5? Yeah, I mean, more than 5, definitely. He was incredibly reliable for Roma in the 80s. But I don't know how many he should have won. Like, I don't know if this is a player that if he should have won, 50, should he have won 60? I wouldn't go that far, but certainly more than 5. I mean, he comes through at Genoa, plays for Roma, plays for Napoli, noted for his consistency, noted for his versatility, his speed. But it's a lot of really tough competition. Like, it's a lot of really tough competition. to get into the Italian team, especially back then, with just the different options that they always had available to them. If we look at the 82 World Cup, just as an example, Cabrini plays, I think, left back for almost the entire tournament. First 2 games, him, plays first 3. So Cabrini is the left back for the entire World Cup. Like, Baresi couldn't get in the team for that World Cup. Bergamy couldn't get in the team. You have to remember that the caliber of players that the Italians had was just second to none. Defensively, they were just monsters. Sciria plays just sensational. Like, it's a phenomenally strong defense. Colavati, who people just don't talk about, was an absolute monster for both Milan clubs in the 70s and 80s. Gentile played right back, could play left side, but played right back for that tournament. I think he should have got more than 5, but I don't know how many. Like, I'd be uncomfortable saying, well, he should have got 50, you know? I mean, Bergamy gets in for, I think, the semi-final and the final when they changed the shape, but he couldn't get, I think he had 1 cap going into the tournament. Baresi was uncapped, couldn't get a game. But Cabrini and then Maldini, that's going to make it really, really tough, you know? That's questions. So I'll be back after this. Right, welcome back. So we have breaking news. We actually have 2 bits of breaking news, but we'll go with this one first. Lucas Paqueta has been charged by the Football Association for alleged breaches of betting rules. 26-year-old was interviewed by the FA last September and gave the governing body access to his phone the following month. The FA investigation was triggered by suspicious betting patterns surrounding a stoppage time yellow card received by the Brazilian international in West Ham's 1-1 draw at Bournemouth on the opening day of the season. An FA statement released on Thursday read that Lucas Paqueta has been charged with misconduct in relation to alleged breaches of FA rules E5 and F3. The player has been charged with 4 breaches of FA rule E5.1 in relation to his conduct in the club's Premier League fixtures against Leicester City, Aston Villa, Leeds, and Bournemouth. 3 of them games, obviously, last season, 1 this season. It is alleged that he directly sought to influence the progress, conduct, or any other aspect of or occurrence in these matches by intentionally seeking to receive a card from the referee for the improper purpose of affecting the betting market in order for one or more persons to profit from betting. Paqueta has also been charged with 2 breaches of FA Rule F3 in respect to alleged failures to comply pursuant to FA Rule F2. The player has until June the 3rd to provide a response to these charges. Wow. That's not like an Ivan Toney situation or, Tonali situation. That's much more serious than that. That could potentially be a very long ban for Lucas Paqueta. Like, that could be a year. That could be 2 years. We've just seen in the NBA, for those that follow the NBA, a player banned from the NBA for life for something similar, trying to influence the betting market for the benefit of others. In Jonte Porter, younger brother of Michael Porter Jr. of the Denver Nuggets. Jonte was with the Toronto Raptors, and he wasn't a particularly good player, Was very promising as a young player, was very highly rated at like 16, 17, but had a lot of injuries and just never quite worked out in the NBA. But regardless, he was banned for life from the NBA. Now, they're not going to ban Paqueta for life, but could they ban him for 2 years? And then maybe it gets appealed down to 1 year? Oh, that's massive. And in linked news, West Ham today have announced that they have appointed a new manager, and that is Julian Lopetegui, which we all knew was coming. But now he's got a major headache to deal as his first order of business. If anyone thought Mohamed Kudus was leaving West Ham this year, he most definitely is not. Absolutely no chance is he leaving now. The other bit of breaking news is Crystal Palace related. And this is very exciting news for Crystal Palace fans. It has been reported that they have now agreed a fee for Chadi Riyad, the young defender from Barcelona. Outstanding young centre-back, left-footed, has spent this year on loan with Real Betis. Fee rumoured to be between kind of 12 and 13 million euro with some small add-ons. I think that is a sensational get. I'm stunned. Absolutely stunned, to be honest. He is so, so good. Wow. If they can keep Guehi and Anderson, that back three is going to be absolutely brilliant next year. They've got good fullbacks in Munoz and Mitchell. Doucouré will be back next to Wharton. If they could keep Olise and Eze and Mateta, plus they've got Dean Henderson in goal and Sam Johnson to come back, that's a really formidable team. Right, what else have we got here? Benfica have triggered the buy option in their loan for Alvaro Fernandez, the young left-back from Manchester United. United do have a buyback clause and a sell-on clause, but they've made a significant mistake there. Georgi Mamardashvili, the young Georgian goalkeeper at Valencia, has said that he almost moved to Bayern Munich last summer. My agent visited Bayern to find an apartment, but as far as I know, in the end, they refused to pay 35 million for him. Wow. Mehdi Taremi is in Milan, where he will be joining Inter on a free transfer this summer. Thiago Motta has decided to leave Bologna and join Juve on a 3-year contract. Good luck to him there, but that is a big, tough job. An awful lot of work needed at that club. Francesco Ferriola has arrived in Amsterdam and is set to become the new Ajax manager. There was a thought or a hint that it was possible that Brighton might nip in and nab him, but it looks like he's decided to stick with Ajax, which I think is maybe a mistake for him. In the most weird manager story of the season, it looks like Vincent Kompany is about to be the new Bayern Munich manager. They're still working on a compensation package, but it looks like he is the new manager of Bayern Munich, which is mad. Barcelona are pushing forward with a move for Hansi Flick. Now, I suppose much depends on Xavi. Can they sack Xavi? Can they afford to sack Xavi? It would certainly be a bad look if they did, having begged him to stay. But we'll see what happens there. It looks like Dougie Friedman has turned down Newcastle, where he had been offered the role of sporting director, and is set to stay at Crystal Palace. So fair play to him. Motta at Juve is interesting. Really interesting. Italy have named their squad for the European Championships. Donnarumma, this is a provisional squad, obviously. Donnarumma, Provedel of Lazio, Alex Murray of Napoli, and Vicario as the goalkeepers. Acerbi, Bastoni, Bellanova, Buongiorno, Calafiori, Cambiasso, Darmian, Di Lorenzo, DiMarco, Mancini, and Scalvini as the defensive group. That's really strong, to be fair. Midfield, Barella, Cristante, Fagioli, Foloroncio of Verona, Frattesi, Jorginho, Pellegrini, and Samuel Ricci. That's a really good group as well. Like, you don't realise how much talent the Italians actually have. Chiesa, El Shaarawy, meh. Orsolini, Raspadori, Retegui, Scamacca, and Zaccagni as the forwards. That's not as strong. Not as strong, but not bad. Like, it's not terrible. There's a really good team to be found in that group. Really good team to be found. What else do we have? Is that everything? That seems to be everything. Right, we'll do the gossip. Chelsea are in discussions with Kieran McKenna's representatives about becoming the new manager. It's from Football Insider, so throw that in the bin. Bernardo Silva can leave this summer if Man City receive an offer of at least 50 million. He has a buyout in his contract, so again, nonsense from Football Insider. England could appoint Maurizio Pochettino if Gareth Southgate steps down after the Euros. That could be interesting. That genuinely could be interesting. Now, would he be interested in international football? I don't know. Pochettino would be interested to talk to Manchester United if they sack Ten Hag. They've long been obsessed with him, so, you know. Chelsea have identified a short list of candidates to replace Pochettino and hope to make an appointment in a matter of days. Leicester are braced for an approach for Enzo Maresca. It'd be something else if Maresca left Leicester and went there and McKenna left Ipswich and went to Brighton. Those two clubs only after getting promoted. Arsenal are ready to move for Justin Bijlow as they expect Aaron Ramsdale to depart. He's a good goalkeeper. He's very injury prone and he'd be silly to go anywhere he's not going to be first choice because he should be the Dutch national team keeper for the next 5-6 years. Well, no, not that long because Verbruggen will be within 3 years, Verbruggen will be number one. But Bijlow could be the stopgap until then. Tottenham are willing to offload Richarlison to make space for Dominic Solanke. Napoli and Nigeria striker Victor Osimhen is set to reject interest from PSG as he looks to secure a move to Chelsea. That's from Team Talk, so you wouldn't pay any attention to that. Representatives of Manchester City held one conversation. Sorry, Manchester City's Kevin De Bruyne held one conversation with San Diego FC, but there's no suggestion that the Belgian is ready to move. West Ham are in advanced talks to sign Fabricio Bruno from Flamengo. I wouldn't be keen on that. He's good, like he is good, but he's 28. He's never left Brazil. Like I just wouldn't sign a player at that point personally. But he has recently become a Brazilian international, so maybe he's just a late bloomer. This piece about Chatty Riyadh. Jordan Pickford has given clear indication he will remain at Everton. I doubt it, but you never know. Dougie Friedman has rejected an offer from Newcastle to replace. Yeah, we've just been through that. Benjamin Sesko will decide whether he wants to remain at RB Leipzig or move on before the Euros. Newcastle are closing in the signing of Tosin Adarabioyo and Lloyd Kelly. Eddie Howe also wants Michael Olise. I just don't think he'll go to a non-Champions League club. Manchester United are not open to sanctioning a move for Bruno Fernandes. Sorry, excuse me. They're not open to sanctioning a new deal for Bruno Fernandes. That's a bit strange. That they wouldn't be open to... Now, it could be nonsense. It could well be nonsense. But Al Nazir have shown interest. Now, if I think he would be absolutely insane to go there. I mean, it's bad enough he's got to carry Cristiano at club level for United for 18 months. It's bad enough he has to do it for the national team for the last 5 years. But you don't want to go and do it in Saudi. Absolutely not. Right, that's me for today, folks. I've kind of lost track of what I'm thinking of. My head's starting to get a bit woozy, so I will see you all tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Social Podcast Network.
Your Memorial Day weekend haul can be found with one stop at Meijer. Pick up fresh from Meijer 80% lean ground beef family pack for just $2.99 a pound. Plus, buy 5, save $5 on Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce, Breyer's ice cream, and 24-pack Coca-Cola or Pepsi products, plus deposit where applicable. And rev up your savings and earn 50 points per gallon of gas pumped at any Meijer Express through June 1st. Get everything you need for Memorial Day this week at Meijer. Exclusions apply. See all the deals in the Meijer app.